Good evening and welcome to tonight's program from the Gay Liberation Network here on Chicago Access Network Television. On tonight's show, with me tonight is Brent Holman-Gomez. This is Andy Thayer with the Gay Liberation Network. The Gay Liberation Network is a direct action organization dedicated to lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgendered freedom. We are for full rights and equality and liberation for the LGBT community. And this is a call-in show. We're going to be having opportunity for your calls a little bit later here. GLN is, as I said, we're an activist organization. We're all volunteer, dedicated to equal rights for the LGBT community. Tonight we're going to be talking about the defeat in the Maine referendum. For those who don't know, the LGBT community suffered a devastating defeat in early November with the passage of Question 1 in Maine. So, Brent, tell us what you think about the defeat in Maine.
Well, it's very disappointing because Maine is surrounded on all sides by states that are supportive of marriage for LGBT people. On the north, with Canada, where we have full marriage rights in their whole federal system there, as well as on the southwest side by New Hampshire, and they don't actually abut, have a common boundary with Massachusetts, but they're within, like a 20-mile distance of Massachusetts, which was the first state in the United States that passed gay marriage, and has both passed it on a common popular vote basis as well as a legislative basis and a court basis. So,
and for those who aren't familiar with what happened in Maine, basically we won marriage equality, but then unfortunately the vote in early November took it away, and it was a little bit more than 5 percentage points spread against us, which was going into the vote, it looked like it was too close to call, but 5 percentage points is not a close loss in an election. And the unfortunate thing about Maine, unlike, say, places like Alabama, where we also lost, was that Maine was eminently winnable. That, as Brent was saying, we had the experience of nearby Canada, nearby Massachusetts, as well as much of the rest of New England to point to, where people could say, look, the sky hasn't fallen in these areas. LGBT people have been enjoying equal marriage rights, and yet the fear process that was whipped up by opponents of legal equality for same-sex couples was effective. And I think we have to look at, say, why was that effective, and what could we have done differently to win in that state.
Right. This is the 31st state, I believe.
That's correct.
That has been lost to a popular vote, that changed something about their law in their state that said that marriage is only going to be between a man and a woman. And this is the second time now after California Proposition 8 where we're seeing the target of the anti-gay side is being the education of children. They are, in California as well as in Maine, they used ads that said that your children in school are going to be indoctrinated to fairness towards LGBT people, and that they'll be talking about gay sex. In classrooms. Yeah,
like just because there's talk of heterosexual marriage, there's talk of heterosexual sex. I mean, on a logical basis, the arguments were a failure, but on an emotional basis, they hit the ball out of the park. And the thing is, we have seen this before, not just in California, going back to the days of Anita Bryant with her so-called Save Our Children crusade, where she successfully rolled back a whole series of pro-LGBT legislation back in the late 1970s. This tack of saying the gays are after your children has been successfully used before, but it's important to note that it's also been successfully fought against, most notably in the 1978 Briggs Amendment. It was an initiative in California named after its sponsor, John Briggs, that said that gays could not be school teachers. And again, it was the gays are coming after our children, therefore we can't have equal rights for gays in terms of employment. And yet, the difference between the Briggs Amendment and the successful campaign that our community and others had against it was that we took the gloves off and we said about our opposition, which I think is entirely correct. Our opposition, those who are opposed to legal equality for any group of people, are bigots. I mean, that is the definition of hate. That is the definition of bigotry, whether it's directed against African Americans, Latinos, Jews, gays, whomever, or people of different faiths.
And Harvey Milk made a big point of saying we are not an issue. These are our lives that you're talking about. They were talking about, the Briggs Amendment was talking about taking away people's jobs directly, people's livelihoods. And the same is true with these marriage laws, and we need to make our issues less of a fair discussion of this political issue, this political football hot potato, and more about the lives of Mainers, the lives of Californians, the lives of people here in Illinois.
But I think that was done in these ads. I do think they in terms of the ads, they did talk about that the thing that was not done, though, was to say, if you're opposed to legal equality, you are a bigot. And we successfully labeled Anita Bryant as a bigot, and people did not want to be associated with her as a result. And so we not only defeated the Briggs Amendment, we also put Anita Bryant's professional career into a tailspin. So that the advertisers that she had previously depended on, the Florida orange growers, just ran as far away from her as they could. And we did the same thing vis-a-vis Dr. Laura Schlesinger around the turn of the century.
It's somewhat ironic or freakish that Anita Bryant, I believe, was a beauty queen. She was Miss America or something.
Yeah, like
in the late 70s, just like Carrie Prejean today.
Right.
And in that time period, in the late 70s, we, the gay community, were able to basically ruin the career of this pageantress. And today, with Prejean, at least up to this point,
ridiculous figure.
Right,
I mean,
by
any
she's
definition,
still kind of holding her own, even though she's totally inadequate and
sex tapes and all the rest of it, and yet her career is much better than Anita Bryant's was.
Right. I mean, she still is a reasonable candidate to come on Larry King for an interview that she can't answer questions to.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we could have killed two birds, so to speak, with one stone in the Maine referendum, and it's unfortunate that we were unable to do. We were able to do. It's unfortunate that we didn't do it in spite of the urging. And I think we can also proudly point to the example here in Illinois, because there have been a couple attempts to get anti-gay, albeit advisory, referendum on the Illinois statewide ballot. And both of those were defeated before they even got on the ballot, because we were able to politically inoculate people against the anti-gay leaders who were pushing them. Most notably, Peter LaBarbera, who was then with the Illinois Family Institute, and due to his failure, was actually moved out of that organization, to put it politely. Now, we do have a caller or two, so let's take a caller here.
Hello, Joe.
Good evening, gentlemen. Because something may work or not work in another country, that don't mean we should have it in this country. Like, for example, like everybody in favor of health care. When you look in countries such as France and England, it's not working. They're going bankrupt. We need to take a close look at things. That's not an excuse because other countries do certain things.
Well, go ahead.
I beg to differ. I mean, this isn't the question of how to pay for something. This is the question of how are you going to allow me as a citizen of this country to take care of the person that I love. Other people in this country have many more rights and benefits as to the methods that they can take care of the person that they love by the simple fact that they are in a mixed sex relationship. When I come to the society in a same-sex relationship, I don't get any of those benefits, and those benefits are immigration, Social Security, inheritance benefits, hospital visitation benefits, tax benefits. There's just a variety of economic as well as just livelihood items out there that is a strict distinguishment that we are making, and a discrimination that is being made in this country between one citizen and another citizen. With healthcare right now, the argument could be made that you're making the same discriminatory thing based on an economic class, but in general, just based on any one component of the citizen status in in this country, the healthcare doesn't necessarily change between citizen A and citizen B.
Oh, I would say, why shouldn't we take a look at the experience of other countries? I mean, culturally, Canada is as close to the United States as any other country in the world, and yet they have had nationalized health care there and have got a far better health result in terms of mortality rates, infant mortality, any number of different indices than the United States. In terms of fiscally, the United States is compared to the rest of the developed world, we've got a budget deficit which far surpasses that per capita basis is France. They have a far better health result per capita. They pay far less for it. So whether you're talking about cultural issues, so-called, like marriage, or whether you're talking about fiscal issues like healthcare, why should we be so damned arrogant as to not look across the border to other countries that are doing things a lot better than us and say, hey, maybe the French have got a better idea about healthcare. Maybe Canada's got a better idea about equal rights. That you look at the indices of inequality in the United States on things like income and violence against other communities and so forth. And the United States is unique in terms of being at the top of the heap in terms of violence amongst its citizens and bad health care. It'd be hard to do it worse than the United States is already doing it in terms of health care and in many instances in terms of equality. So I think it would be stupid of us not to look at places like France that are doing it a lot better.
Right. In many places in Maine, the closest town to them is in Canada. So, they're definitely, in the case of Maine, there's a, some common cultural experience there between between the people in the two different countries. So there you have two different answers, Joe.
Yeah. Well, and getting back to why we lost Maine. In most other cases, not California, where it was a pretty even fundraising issue, but in most other cases, the pro-gay side has been vastly outspent. In the case of Maine, it was really perhaps the first time where we had a huge fundraising advantage over our opponents, nearly 2-1. And so the idea that we didn't raise enough money or whatever in order to have a good outcome really wasn't it. It was the message on our side was so weak. We were trying to fight illogic and fear with logic. And unfortunately, particularly when you're dealing with a circumstance where you have an economic crisis and people are losing their homes and their jobs and the rest of it, fear unfortunately works.
Right. You also had a religious in Maine, as with every other state that I'm aware of, you've had a huge effort by the religious community, and particularly in the case of Maine with the Catholic Church. Of the Catholic Church is organized in a hierarchical system. It is not a it doesn't make any effort to be a democratic order. The decisions that are made by the bishop are based on what they think the Pope wants, or what the Pope communicates to them, and the statements that are made by the priest in the individual congregation are similarly guided by the bishop. And they made, I think, 20% of all of the funds that were given to the anti-gay marriage side, the yes on question 1 side, came from these
Portland
Catholic orders,
Yeah,
the corporate structure of the
Portland Archdiocese,
The Portland
1/5,
Archdiocese.
and which raises serious questions about not only separation of church and state in general, but also why is it that religious organizations like the Mormon Church or like the Catholic Archdiocese, which get huge tax benefits for declaring themselves as religious benefits, why are they allowed to give money like this? It really raises serious questions, and I know that there are some who are attempting to pursue lawsuits along these lines. The problem is that when you have a sitting president of the United States who says he has no problem with so-called faith-based funding by the federal government to religious organizations, a holdover, I might add, of the George W. Bush administration, that legitimizes that violation of separation of church and state, and unfortunately, far too few people on the left or liberals or whatever you want to talk at are calling the president out on this issue. Before we continue with our conversation, many people in the community are perhaps aware of the fact that the Gay Liberation Network has been dealing with an issue of an anti-gay police officer who's been operating out of the Town Hall district on Chicago's north side, the so-called Boys Town community centered on Halstead. This officer, Richard Fiorito, is now subject to 37 lawsuits accusing him of falsely framing people for false DUIs, and then being able to collect all sorts of overtime as a result. Often he's used anti-gay epithets towards these officers. The Gay Liberation Network, I'm proud to say, we've made a point of protesting against this officer, and the next protest is actually going to be at the upcoming police board meeting, which is this coming Thursday. We're going to be meeting in front of the Chicago Police Headquarters at 3510 South Michigan Avenue at 7 p.m. The meeting of the police board begins at 7:30 p.m., and so we'd encourage people to come out to that protest. It's very important for us to send the message that officers that discriminate against any community are not going to be tolerated. We have gotten some progress on this case. We finally got Officer Fiorito taken off of the force in terms of not being able to exercise his police powers. He is still collecting a paycheck, but our next move is to try and get the officer criminally charged by the Cook County State's Attorney's Office.
This guy has, had a huge number, like 800 DUI arrests in his career. I mean, he's really figured out that he can make money off of these arrests, and then to the point of falsifying, his representation of what happened in these items. The Mothers Against Drunk Driving was going to give an award to this fellow, and as I understand it, they rescinded their award because they did give the reward, but then a spokesperson about a month ago basically said that Officer Fiorito is a fraud and discredits the whole anti-drunk driving movement, and so they rapidly disassociated themselves from him, and good for them for doing so. Yeah, and he's just been ruthless. I mean, the people that that I've met as well as heard about that are the victims of these cases, are people with, a deaf person, a person that doesn't have a leg, just there's
They
been
said
just
that the person
ruthless
without a leg
efforts.
was that this person wasn't walking properly. Well, duh. And they said that the woman, two deaf women, actually in two separate instances, that they failed verbal sobriety tests when they indicated to Officer Fiorito that they're deaf. So of course they can't do a verbal sobriety test.
Right, but the CPD is moving at glacial pace to control this employee of theirs that obviously has major problems. If there's 37 civil cases filed against him, and they're filed against him as well as the CPD is named in those cases. So we want the CPD to take further action. We want Anita Alvarez, the state's attorney, to file criminal charges against him. To basically encourage the police department to take further action to control their employee.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of institutions, including the police board itself, that are responsible for potentially firing this officer, but Anita Alvarez alone can file criminal charges against him. And they've supposedly been investigating this officer since March of this year. There have been numerous occasions since March when he still had policing powers, where he perjured himself. We just had a press conference yesterday morning which showed through Officer Fiorito's own videotape of his own dashboard camera that his police report was a tissue of lies. And yet he still hasn't been criminally charged. And so I don't think we should be surprised in this city that tolerated John Burge's tortures and his whole ring of tortured cops for 2.5 decades, that the state's attorney's office might be operating very slowly in this case and dragging its heels. That the only way that we're going to get real movement out of the state's attorney's office, the police board, and other responsible institutions is to pressure them in a way, to force them to act on the very clear evidence of criminal wrongdoing by Officer Fiorito. So please come out to that protest. Just wanted to inform people of a few other announcements before we close out tonight's show. The Gay Liberation Network, we meet the first Wednesday of each month at the technical term for it is not a field house, but it's the building in Burger Park. It's the first Wednesday of each month at 7 p.m. sharp, located at the corner of Sheridan Road and Granville, conveniently located just a couple blocks east of the Granville Red Line L stop. And our next show on Chicago Access Network Television is going to be Friday, December 11th at the same time, same channel as you're watching here tonight. And again, please show up at the next police board meeting. This is an opportunity for people who are not only complaining about Officer Fiorito, but if you have a problem with brutal or corrupt police officers in your neighborhood, you should come to this meeting and speak out about the situation that you are facing. Again, Chicago Police Headquarters, 3510 South Michigan Avenue. It's just a few blocks east of the 35th Street stop on the Red Line L. We'll be meeting in front at 7 p.m. The meeting starts promptly at 7:30 p.m. If you want to find out about how you can make public comment at this meeting, we encourage you to check out our website at gayliberation.net, and we'll be happy to give you that information. Just email us at the email address that you see at that website. So once again, this is Andy Thayer with Brent Holman-Gomez. Thanks so much for watching tonight, and we'll see you again in December.